A 10-year-old girl was walking home with her beloved dog, completely unaware that three men were watching her every step. As she turned onto a deserted street, they closed in, sinister smiles spreading across their faces. But what they didn't know was that her dog was no ordinary pet. It had been trained to fight, to protect, and tonight it would prove exactly that. As darkness swallowed the alley, a nightmare for the criminals was about to begin. Don't take your eyes off the screen because what happens next will leave you stunned. Like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss out on more thrilling stories. It was a quiet evening in the town of Riverbend, where the streets were usually safe and people knew their neighbors by name. The sun had started dipping below the horizon, casting a warm golden hue over the sidewalks. 10-year-old Emily Carter walked with a small bag of groceries clutched in her hands, humming softly as she made her way home. Her mother had sent her to the local market for some essentials, something she had done many times before without trouble. But tonight would be different. By her side trotted Duke, a large, muscular German shepherd with intelligent eyes and an imposing stance. To most, Duke looked like any other well-trained pet, but he was much more than that. Before joining the Carter family, Duke had been a K-9 officer working alongside Emily's father, Officer Ryan Carter. After an injury forced him into early retirement, the loyal dog had found a new purpose protecting Emily. As the little girl and her protector turned down a quieter street lined with trees, the atmosphere shifted. The air felt heavier. The usual distant sounds of laughter and traffic seemed muffled. A subtle feeling of unease crept into Emily's chest, though she couldn't quite explain why. She held the bag a little tighter and glanced down at Duke, who had slowed his pace. His ears perked, his stance more alert than before. From behind them, the sound of a motorcycle engine revved. Emily turned her head slightly, enough to see the approaching figures without making it obvious she had noticed them. Three men on motorcycles cruised slowly toward her, their black leather jackets and dark sunglasses making them look even more menacing in the dim light. The leader, a burly man with a jagged scar across his cheek, smirked as he whispered something to his companions. Emily felt her heart pick up speed. She had heard about this gang before, the Iron Fangs. They had been causing trouble around town, vandalizing stores, stealing from local businesses, and intimidating residents. Her father had warned her to avoid them at all costs. But now there was no avoiding them. They had chosen her. Duke's low growl vibrated through the air, a warning that sent shivers down Emily's spine. The men chuckled as they slowed their bikes to a stop, forming a loose circle around the girl and her dog. "Hey there, little lady," the scarred man drawled, his voice thick with amusement. "You lost." Emily shook her head, taking a cautious step backward. "Number, I'm just going home." Another biker, taller with a snake tattoo running down his neck, tilted his head. "How about we give you a ride? Wouldn't want a sweet thing like you walking all alone." Duke stepped forward, his growl deepening. Emily could feel the tension coiling in his muscles, ready to spring at a moment's notice. Scarface laughed. "Oh no, fellas. Looks like she's got a bodyguard." The third biker, younger with a cruel grin, scoffed. "What's he gonna do, huh? Bark us to death?" Emily didn't respond. She knew what Duke was capable of. These men had no idea what they were about to face. Scarface reached out, his fingers curling toward Emily's arm. That was his mistake. Duke lunged. Scarface barely had time to react before Duke launched himself forward, his powerful jaws clamping down on the man's wrist with precise force. A strangled yell tore from Scarface's throat as he stumbled backward, his free hand desperately trying to shake Duke off. The other two bikers froze for a split second, their cocky smirks wiped away as they realized this was no ordinary dog. Snake Tattoo lunged, reaching for Duke in an attempt to pry him off his leader. But Duke was trained for moments like this. Releasing Scarface just in time, he twisted his body and met Snake Tattoo midair, his massive frame slamming into the biker's chest with brutal force. The man hit the pavement with a sickening thud, the air rushing from his lungs as he struggled to get up. Duke spun back to Emily, standing firm between her and the gang, his growl a deep, rumbling warning that sent a shiver through the night air. The youngest biker hesitated, glancing between his fallen comrades and the dog standing guard. This wasn't the easy job they had expected. Emily could see the uncertainty flicker across his face, the first crack in his bravado. But Scarface, still clutching his bleeding wrist, snarled in fury and reached into his jacket, pulling out a glinting switchblade. Duke's stance shifted, his body coiling like a spring ready to explode. Emily's heart pounded. Her father had trained Duke to disarm threats, but she had never seen him in a real fight until now. Scarface gritted his teeth. "I'm not afraid of a stupid mutt." Emily took a step back, her mind racing. If she ran, they might chase her. But if she stayed, Duke would protect her. She had no doubt about that. Scarface lunged, the knife flashing under the streetlights. But Duke was faster. With pinpoint accuracy, he dodged the blade, clamped onto Scarface's forearm, and twisted. The knife clattered to the ground as the man let out a howl of pain. Duke didn't let go. He drove Scarface down, pinning him against the pavement, his sharp teeth hovering just inches from the man's throat. The threat was clear. One wrong move and Duke would finish what he started. Snake Tattoo staggered to his feet, his eyes darting between his leader and the girl. He cursed under his breath and took a step toward Emily. But before he could reach her, the distant wail of sirens cut through the air. The police were coming. The youngest biker panicked first. "We need to go now." Snake Tattoo hesitated for only a moment before shoving his bike upright and revving the engine. Scarface, still pinned under Duke's weight, let out a furious growl. "Get this dog off me!" Duke held his ground until the approaching red and blue lights bathed the street in flashing colors. Only then did he release Scarface and retreat to Emily's side, his growl never ceasing. Scarface scrambled to his feet, staggering back as he clutched his wounded arm. He cast one final glare at Emily and Duke before turning on his heel and sprinting toward his gang. The iron fangs roared away into the night, their engines screaming as they disappeared down the road. Emily felt her knees weaken, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Duke, sensing her distress, nuzzled against her side, his warm presence grounding her. The sirens grew louder, and within moments, 2 police cruisers skidded to a halt. Officers poured out, guns raised, scanning the scene. "Emily!" The familiar voice made her look up. Her father, Officer Ryan Carter, ran toward her, his face filled with both worry and relief. She barely had time to react before she was scooped into his arms. "Dad," she whispered, her voice shaky. Ryan pulled back, his hands gripping her shoulders. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head quickly. "Number Duke protected me." Her father turned to the German shepherd, who stood tall, his tail still, and his eyes locked on the retreating headlights of the bikers. One of the officers whistled. "That dog just took on 3 guys by himself." Another chuckled, shaking his head. "Not just any dog. That's Carter's old K9. Ryan knelt beside Duke, rubbing the dog's thick fur. "Good boy. You did good." Emily let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The fear was fading now, replaced by something else. Gratitude. A few officers spread out, speaking into their radios as they gathered evidence. The knife Scarface had dropped was collected, and witnesses were questioned. Ryan kept Emily close as he listened to the reports, his grip on her never loosening. "They'll be caught," one of the officers assured them. "We've had an eye on the Iron Fangs for a while. After tonight, they won't get far." Emily looked up at her father. "What if they come back?" Ryan's expression hardened, but his voice was gentle. "They won't. And even if they try, they'll have to get through me first. And Duke." Emily glanced down at her loyal companion, who wagged his tail slightly as if agreeing. That night, Duke was hailed as a hero. News of his bravery spread through Riverbend, and people in town began to treat him as a legend. But for Duke, none of that mattered. His only mission had always been clear: protect Emily, no matter what. And that was exactly what he had done. As Emily lay in bed that night, Duke curled up beside her, his large frame warm against her side. She reached out and ran her fingers through his fur, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breathing. "You saved me," she whispered. Duke let out a soft huff, his eyes half closed. Emily smiled. She didn't need him to say anything. She already knew. Courage wasn't about being the biggest or the strongest. It was about standing your ground, about loyalty and love. And in the face of danger, a true friend would always be there. That night, Emily fell asleep knowing she was safe, because as long as Duke was by her side, she had nothing to fear.